Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a bit of an instructional video for you. Not too many knives in this one, but I will show you my EDC for today, which is the Manix 2 Lockback. Pretty well my favorite version of the Manix. Let's go ahead and introduce this particular video. I've got some paracord here. We're going to talk about some knots that I think are really, really useful and would benefit just about anyone. Okay. Now let me speak to those of you who say, I'm just not good at tying knots. Rope just doesn't make any sense to me. Here's what I would say. This isn't going to be a long video. Take a few minutes, watch this video, follow along. And if you don't get it today, that's fine. Do it again tomorrow and the next day. And by the third day, you will probably have a pretty good handle on all of these knots. None of them are terribly difficult. And then what you should do is take a 5 minutes once a week and just run through those knots, okay? And if you do that, you will always have some good tools in your toolbox in terms of knots that you can tie to get the jobs done that you need to get done, okay? So although knots can come off a little confusing initially, if you just go slow, take your time and practice, they're actually quite simple. And the more you kind of get proficient with a few knots, the easier other knots will come to you. So just wanted to say that at the beginning to kind of give those of you who feel less than confident about your knot tying ability a little more confidence and a little encouragement. Let's go ahead and get into the knots that I want to go over. By the way, these are going to be knots that are useful for everyday life. Okay, I've tried not to get into knots that are good for or specifically for rescue or survival or those kinds of things. Although there's obviously going to be some crossover here. These are knots that I just think you'll find extremely helpful just in day-to-day tasks. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the very first one, which I guess isn't a knot, it's actually a hitch, and that's going to be the clove hitch. So let's imagine this piece, this is our hockey stick of learning here. We're going to imagine that this is welded in place. So I can't slide something over the ends of it. This is, a welded railing or the rung of a ladder or something like that. For the times where we want to slide something over the end, we're going to use this ruler. Now the ruler is not perfect because the rope doesn't slide on it properly, so things won't cinch up, but it should serve well enough to get the point across. Okay, so I've got this ladder here. I'm afraid that the bottom is going to slip out, let's say, or something like that. And so I want to, or maybe I'm on the roof and I want to pull it up to me instead of have someone raise it up from the ground. Not sure why you would, but let's just pretend we need to tie this off. So all I'm going to do is take my line, go around that, cross it over. And then on the last time around, I'm just going to slide it up through under that little sort of X I've created. And there we go. We have a clove hitch. So nice strong knot, all kinds of things you can do with this. The one thing I would say is if there was some really, really important thing I was holding on to here, I would probably bring this around again and put just like a quick overhand knot or a couple of hitches in it to hold it in place, okay? So that's the first way of tying a clove hitch. There is another way, and this is for use when I've got a tool. Let's imagine this is a sledgehammer, and I need to get it up onto a roof. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to take my line. I'm going to make two opposing loops. Okay, so notice this loop goes over, this loop goes under, cross them over. All right, slide this guy through and pull that tight. And as I said, it's not going to cinch up very nicely. There we go. But I end up with the same idea. Now I'm not going to go over these multiple times because you can easily rewind the video. And so that's how I would tie a clove hitch if I, let's say, this was a sledgehammer that I was going to pull up to a roof that I needed to pound on something. All right, so that's number one. Number two is going to be an extremely useful family of knots that you can do a number of things with, and that is the figure 8 knot, okay? And it looks very much like it sounds. So I'm going to try to do this where you can see it pretty easily. So I come over, I come behind, and then back up through, and there we go. You can see that it actually looks like an 8. So I know you're going, Kevin, I'm glad you can, weave an 8 into a piece of rope, but what good is that? Well, here is the main way that this gets tied and the way that it's highly, highly useful. So I take a bite, okay, put a bend in my rope, and I do the exact same thing. I come over, around behind and back up through. And now I have what's called a figure 8 on a bite, and I can do all kinds of things with this. I can clip into a carabiner, you know, and now I'm attached to this. I can make a loop, anything that I need to hook onto, I can do it. Okay, and that works really well, except what if I want to get back on this ladder rung? You can see that's not going to work. There's a solution to that, and that's why we initially tied this knot just with the rope. So if we go back to our first way of doing this, okay, we take our rope, come around, go under and back up through. Now I've got my figure 8, okay? And what I can do is run this around my ladder rung or whatever this happens to be and follow the line around. So I'm following this line. It's got to follow it exactly, by the way. That's really, really important. And finally, back through here. Don't ask me why that last bit was so difficult. But now I'm back to essentially having a figure 8 on a bite, but I did it around a fixed object. So I've got a figure 8 with a follow through. By the way, there's another really, really helpful thing that you can do with this knot, which is tie 2 ropes together. And you can probably already imagine how that would work. But if I have my 2 ropes, by the way, these would be ropes of the same size, what I can do is tie my figure 8 in one. Okay, and then do the exact same thing I just did, which is follow it through. And now I've tied my 2 ropes together in a very strong knot that I can load heavily, that is still going to be, you know, the nice thing about a figure 8, there's a couple nice things. One, it's easily identifiable. 2, I can load this pretty heavily and still get it out, okay? That's the big thing, where I'm not going to cinch this down so tightly that I ruin my rope or I cannot get it undone no matter how hard I try. Okay, one other thing I would say about this. Now this is going to be a little extra, and I'm just kind of deciding to do this now. If I have 2 knots of unequal size, okay, or I mean 2 ropes of unequal size, then I need to do what's called a sheet bend. Very, very easy. Let's imagine that this gray rope is the larger rope. I'm going to put a loop in that, just a bend actually, or a bite. I'm going to take my smaller rope, come up, around through, pull it like that. There we go. We've got a quick sheet bend. And this is a way you can tie 2 ropes together if they're not the same size, okay? All right, moving on. And that sheet bend is a little bit of extra. It wasn't on my list to include, and I guess, you know, there'll be no charge for that. So let's go on with the other knots that I can think of that are useful. Next up is going to be a bowline. Now this is the one that your dad or your grandpa taught you, where he said, you make your loop and then the rabbit goes up the hole around the tree, back down the hole, pull this guy tight. Just be aware, there are a couple of ways to tie this wrong. I'm not going to demonstrate them for you for the sake of time, but you can, you know, get this going the wrong way. Either you can make your loop the wrong way. Okay, notice this way versus this way. You can do a couple of different things to mess up a bowline. Just keep practicing. If you know those instructions, you can watch this video and kind of follow along with what I'm doing. Very quickly, if you just do it over and over again, it'll come to you. All right, the next knot that I want to tie is going to be one that is extremely useful. I'm just going to throw a quick overhand knot in this line. So let's imagine, that's going to be too long. Need to tie this bad boy around something else. Okay, this will work. So let's imagine I'm, you know, tying a mattress to the roof of a car or something. So I tie this to my roof rack. Okay, I pull this over the mattress and I want to be able to pull this tight. Well, there's a really, really simple knot called a trucker's hitch that works exceptionally well for this. Okay, what you're going to do is put a loop in the rope. Okay, so there's my loop. Then I want to pull the opposing side up through. Okay, that's going to make me a nice little slip knot. Notice how this will slip up and down on my line. Now I'm going to run this other end of the rope that you guys can't see through, you know, the other side of my car or whatever. Come back. There we go. Now I can pull on this, and I actually have a mechanical advantage created so that I can get this really, really tight. When I get it as tight as I want, I'm just going to grab this, put a couple of hitches in it. And so now we're limited for space here, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. But I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. This gives you the ability now to cinch down a load really, really tightly so that your mattress doesn't fly off the roof of your car. And it, of course, comes apart really, really quickly and really, really easily. So that's the trucker's hitch. And I've got one more hitch that I want to show you. And the reason I'm showing you this one is because it's really good for lowering something heavy. So let's imagine I've taken my chimney off the roof, and now I've got this stupid chimney up on a roof, and I'm like, how do I get this thing down? You know, I can, and I have taken them apart brick by brick and dropped each brick down, but there is a good method for doing this where you're lowering something pretty heavy. And we're going to use our carabiner for this. It doesn't have to be a carabiner. Well, it has to be, I guess it does have to be a carabiner, because you've got to be able to open this. This is not a knot. I guess it's kind of not a knot that works well around a fixed point. But I'm going to, and this is a really easy way to tie this knot. I'm going to cross my hands over. So notice my hands are crossed. I'm going to grab the rope on this side, grab the rope on this side, come back across. Okay, so now I've kind of created this weird X thing. And I'm just going to take these two parts, put them together, and clip them in a carabiner. Now, some of you watching already know what this is. This is called a munter hitch. And the benefit of it is it can move, but it moves with quite a bit of friction. Okay, so that means if let's say this is the side my load is on, that's how my hitch will look. And I can just slowly let that out and move my hitch, my heavy load, down off the roof. I'll show you that one more time because it's a little more difficult than the other ones we've done. Okay, so here's my rope. I'm going to cross my hands. I grab one hand with one side with this hand, one side with this hand, pull my hands apart. Okay, let's do it the other way. Pull my hands apart, and now I've created sort of this cross. All right, put them together. Clip them in a carabiner, and I've got a munter hitch, which is good for lowering stuff. Now, this is not for lowering your friend off the roof, okay? It's not a knot that's really well suited to that unless you have some good training and know exactly what you're doing. All right, so there you go, guys. Those are 5 knots and I guess a sheet bend that I wasn't thinking of adding, but I thought once I said tie 2 ropes together, I'm like, well, we better talk about tying 2 ropes that aren't the same. But those are some knots that I find really, really useful. I think all of you can use those in your everyday life. Probably, if you're anything like me, you'll use the clove hitch and the trucker's hitch the most, okay, followed by the figure 8. Figure 8 is a great way of putting a strong loop in a rope whenever you're going to load it heavily. And so hopefully those will be of some use to you. Let me know which one you liked the best, which one you found the most useful, and feel free to recommend any other knots in the bottom that people might want to learn once they've mastered all of these. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.